Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Enhance Your World show. I am your co-host, um, and Chris Alba. And Larkin, you want to introduce yourself?
And I'm Larkin. Great to see you guys.
Sorry, Larkin. It always throws me off just a little bit when we're not when there's the avatar.
Oh, well, at least you
Being
got
able to
one.
see your face.
At least you got one. I'll be on in a few minutes. Susie
Yeah.
didn't have one yesterday. There was nothing on ours.
Oh wow, that would have been challenging for sure.
Oh, just a circle. That's all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's all part of the growing process. And today we're going to talk about natural law and how to work within it to enhance your holistic well-being. This is a fascinating subject, I think, Larkin, and just coming off of a retreat with Amamo. It was a 5-day retreat we had here, and the lessons and the teachings and all the processes and things that we experienced during that time really helped bring me back to that place of thinking about the universal nature of our reality and how our cultural, historical, traditional teachings of how we've gotten to this point can sometimes hinder our true potential growth because we create these rules or excuses or beliefs that give us temporary comfort, but don't allow us to see beyond our own identity to what or how we actually are showing up in this 3D reality.
So that's really powerful.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's really powerful. And I think we need to give the audience examples for those.
Yeah, for sure.
For those thinking in mindset terminology, I'm going to sort of translate what Chris said into mindset terminology too, because it does translate into that. And I think a lot of these things translate cross-culturally, not necessarily meaning geographic culture, but just the way we were raised, the language we use, the arena that we're in. A philosopher would describe this as differently than a mindset coach, who might describe it differently than a historian. So I think, and that would be different than a psychologist. So I think it's important to look, and a way of looking at that also is literally, what are the natural laws of life in the universe that perhaps the Stoics studied, or some of the great spiritual teachers that we talk to, versus what is the programming, brainwashing, and mindset of a society or a culture in order to create a norm that serves those who are running or ruling that culture. And there is a really huge difference there. And along with that, again, you guys hear me talk about every week, is the factor that makes humans powerful but also vulnerable: our subconscious mind. So it is the meaning that we give to things. And if we give somebody a rule and then we create a meaning behind it or a fear behind it, that's going to create a very important stanchion in that culture, in that belief system. And I would say the question is, and probably what a lot of what you guys discussed this weekend, is how does that compare to natural law and what actually serves us individually and collectively as a society? And how much of that is just in order to control each other in a society, right? Because there is a big difference. And this is why often you guys hear Chris and I will favor Native American type of culture, or those cultures that live more closely to the earth, because in order to survive, they had to make their rules according, not all of them, a lot of their rules for society were according to natural law, versus nowadays we think Notice I use the word think. We think, we believe we don't have to do that anymore. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. But anyway, I hope that helps kind of summarize for some of you, what we're talking about. Hi,
Sure.
Rosalie. Welcome.
And yeah, I mean, and it's interesting, right? Because those of us that have gone to a lot of different retreats or a lot of different type of experiences tend to create a expectation or protocol of how things are supposed to go, and then living more universally or spiritually or however you want to label it to define it and create meaning in it. What is one of the things that we were doing was we were knitting these little bags, and they were challenging. And one of the parts of that was anytime you had a negative thought, when you noticed the negative thought, you had to take that stitch out. So it really made you focus on the what was going on in the background, right? And there was stress to make 5 of them to complete the process within that time frame. And so but as we were working on them, I came to this insight that as we were all trying to do it, some people found it easier to go clockwise in the pattern. Some people found it easier to go counterclockwise in the pattern. And some people stitched up and some people stitched down. And so there's the 4 directions. And what I had learned through my process, because I was paying so much attention to my thoughts that I wasn't actually paying much attention to the way I was stitching, that some of my bags contained all 4. And you could see where the pattern changed, but it was the consistency of continuing to do it that allowed it to continue to be created, which I found very fascinating. So the lesson that I learned from this is, anyway, it wasn't necessarily the way I was doing it, but it was in the way that I was consistently doing it is what kept the pattern going. And that's what I would think of as like a comfort or a condition of a way that we want to show up for ourselves, other people. And when we do it in a different way than what we're used to, that's maybe when we get triggered. And in that is some wisdom of how we're used to things going versus the contrast of how they're not going in that moment. And then what's the responsibility after that? Like if you notice, just in this example, when I was going counterclockwise, I would realize, oh, I'm going counterclockwise, and it's easier for me to do that than it was to go clockwise. So when I noticed I was going clockwise, my stitches were different. And I went, oh, wait, I just have to return back to what I was doing before to get back into that flow of ease again. It was just I think that's the profoundness of what the native teachings teach. Because they don't tell you how to go. They don't tell you how to do it necessarily. Like there's a right or wrong way. In fact, there was a mistake. We were eating a very specific diet, and we were in the kitchen and we put celery in the salad because it was available, because there was people here that weren't on the fast, and it was just there. So we just used it because it was available. and later found out that we misstepped the protocol because of our ignorance. We didn't stop to ask, and we just assumed that it was okay. And so the Mamo, in his grace and his understanding and patience, he said, "Don't give yourself a hard time. You didn't know, but now you do, and just don't do it again." And I think that's such a great. Looking back in my life, that's when I found self-compassion. That's when I found true self-love. Was like I did as best I could till I learned better, and then I allowed that awareness to allow me to grow in the way that I lived within my own life and how I relate to the lives of others outside of me.
Wow. I'm so excited that you shared that. And there are so many hundreds of directions in which I'd love to respond to this. Well, my mom and I were just speaking about this the other day. She's a Montessori teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up with both of my parents being teachers, and both very close to the natural world. And, they always shared and taught with us other cultures and things. They both taught naturally very much the same way that you're talking about. And you guys have heard me mention Montessori on here before. And some people, Montessori, just like homeschool. Some people love it, some people hate it. But the truth is that most of Montessori is not really in alignment with what Maria Montessori did anymore. But essentially, what you're talking about is the most natural way for us to learn. It's using our kinesthetics. So it's using all of our senses and our physical body, not just our cognitive mind, to learn, which is one of the issues in society. And with being so overly emphasized upon cognition and cognitive intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
we ignore natural intelligence, spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, psychological intelligence, the intelligence of the body. And this is part of what in neuroscience, is applied as well. And so you can take Chris's example and really what they are applying, unbeknownst to native cultures, they were most naturally doing what we now know scientifically is actually the best way for us to learn. And I, after coaching, mindset coaching and transformational coaching for over 15 years, when I hear what you guys did and the weaving that you did, I have to laugh because, that's probably an example now I will use when I speak to students and clients, because one of the things that you were basically sharing, Chris, is that in these native cultures, in these natural ways, the cultures teach and allow members of society, just through doing things that are useful and natural, to make their own mistakes, to discover things. And, I'm doing the very thing we're saying we don't need to do by explaining this, but I'm doing it for two reasons. Number one, that's what people are used to here. We're used to having these things spelled out. And when you spell them out and you try to teach them from the outside in, it's a different learning process, which is why when I coach, we use people's lives to do it. What's happening. That's what you guys were doing with the weaving.
Right.
And I want to also just remind everybody, that's very symbolic of the habits that you always hear us talking about, the weaving and the mistakes. I love that, where you were saying you have to unweave it if you have a negative thought.
Mm-hmm.
You have something physical, mental, and emotional even to look at. Then you have to experience the fact that you've had to pull out a stitch.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see there's a consequence. Whereas oftentimes in our lives, we don't recognize those patterns and their consequences. And, when we come in and we destroy other cultures that are learning and teaching people the way that you guys did over the weekend with the weaving, for example, we are removing, we're removing a level of standing in your power, a level of connecting with yourself, a level of knowing and realizing the natural laws that we're going to be talking about today for oneself. And when you allow that, you have a whole culture where everybody understands and respects the natural laws, and they want to follow the same rules because they're based on that natural law.
Right.
Versus what we have today in our culture is we force these things, we force the rules from the outside in. And then we also try to force some natural laws, but most of our rules are not based on these natural laws.
Right.
So what you have is people who are resentful, who want to rebel, who don't agree. When everybody understands natural law, guess what? There is no room to disagree because you know it for yourself from the inside out.
Right.
So I can't thank you enough for sharing that, Chris. I think this is, it's just absolutely priceless. And my mom was just saying to me last week, the way people need to learn, the way they do in actual real Montessori, is you have to use your body, mind together, and you have to get it in the neurological programming by actually getting into something physical. By doing it yourself, by going through the motions.
Well, it helps create the wisdom, right? And going back to that example, we all joke the hardest part was the beginning of the weave.
Yep.
So it's like, what a great metaphor. Like anything new that we do, it's challenging in the beginning because it's new and you haven't developed that skill set yet. You haven't developed that connection between the mind and the body. So it's a little more challenging. It's like learning to play an instrument or learning art or learning to conversate, right? Because a true conversation is an art form. It's learning to develop these things, and at first it's challenging, but the more you go through it, the easier it gets. The more you do it, the easier it gets. The more and then you look proficient at it. I mean, some people have been doing things similar to this most of their life. So when they were shown, they were like, "Oh, I got this," and then they were able to help those like me that struggled the whole time to make sure that we are, creating it, the way that it's supposed to be created. Because when I was left to my own devices, I made a really beautiful doily. It didn't turn into a little bag. And it took me a few hours to like look around and like see how everybody was wearing theirs on the finger, and I'm holding mine up and it's like, about this big, and it's like just flat. I'm like, wonder what I did here. And I kept that piece. To me, it's not
Absolutely.
a throwaway. It was like my first attempt.
Yep.
And I'll keep that as a reminder for myself, on my altar as, hey, if I want to be proficient, I have to take one step at a time. And not all of the steps are easy. They're simple, but they're not easy. And the reason that they're not easy is because I'm unweaving all the things that I've done into my past and what my ancestors have done in the past. That's what's healing. It's undoing those cycles, those beliefs, those stories, this is the way it has to be. This is the way it has to be done because this is the way that I was taught. This is the way I was told. And using universal or natural laws is the foundation of everything. It's like the law of gravity. We might not totally understand why it works or how it works, but we all have an example or at least an understanding that it works. And then once we have that acceptance, we can use other natural laws, like the law of flight, like the birds, to create transportation such as airplanes and helicopters and gliders and all of these other things that emulate what nature has already provided for us by observing nature. So we don't have to fight about the teaching. We can just witness it, that it works.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a key point there is we live in a society where we make up the rules.
Right.
And then we can fight about them. But
right.
If everyone understands the natural laws for themselves, which is what native cultures have done, it's a totally different thing. And again, guys, I want to remind you all, what is this doing? This is we're distinguishing here between a false or a fake reality and a reality that is really in sync with what's beneficial to all of us, right? A more natural reality where we all are in sync. We're all resonating together. Everything is going to be serving us individually and collectively when we are making our societal rules and boundaries and laws out of natural law. And why is that? Well, it's naturally what we all need, right? Versus what we have now that is force-fed. See, the programming is the same. In other words, the way that our subconscious mind is brainwashed and programmed is the same regardless of whether we are being exposed to learning and experiencing natural law or fake man-made societal rules.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to react the same way. In other words, we're going to create a belief system about it, comfort zones about it. But what the programming is very, very different. And when you're making the rules that we make up as human beings in order to acquire power or make money and get what we want, and that goes on for generations, you have a belief system that is morphed and passed down and passed down and passed down. And the core of that is lost. Whereas what you'll find in what Chris's example is these cultures have passed these things down for thousands of years based off of natural law. And I feel like I have to throw this out there because I could see people jumping in and arguing and saying, well, every culture has those things from thousands of years ago. Sure, they do. The difference we're emphasizing here is which ones are based off of natural law that teach you how to live, that have life lessons, and your programming is set in a way that, for example, you have patience. You have self-forgiveness when you make a mistake. You embrace mistakes as something empowering to move you forward. And which ones emphasize you're a terrible person, you're not worth living when you make a mistake.
Right.
Or you have to be first in line or you're worthless. Well, when you teach a person that, you cause them to be that person that is tailgating and rear-ending you, cutting people off and causing an accident, giving the finger and causing road rage. Because in that subconscious, that 95% they're not aware of, if they're not first, they're no good.
Right.
And they have fear of being last. Whereas if you're growing up learning and doing the activities Chris just described, what are you learning? I mean, I can't even count. I mean, I could probably make a list of over 100 things, Chris, that a person would gain from just that exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the instructor responded.
Right.
Without anything ever having to be sat down and taught. You have all the essentials that an individual needs to be confident, self-sufficient, know who they are, have social skills, deal with troubles, deal with being alone, deal with change, deal with making decisions. But yet, I do a lot of knit and crochet. So I really respect this because I'm in the process of trying to teach my husband to crochet. As funny as it sounds, it's very hard teaching crochet because people get very frustrated. There is that section where you get frustrated, which from this weekend. But here's the thing. That frustration is us creating new neurological pathways in our body. And I hate to break it to everyone, but if you don't create those intentionally in a similar way to what Chris described that they did this weekend, and you give up and you don't work through that, one way or another, you have to do that in life.
Right.
So if it doesn't come out intentionally as a way of learning, and we don't help our children and help people get through those frustrating parts, what ends up happening is you have sort of what you were starting to describe, Chris. You have a society full of people that is unhappy with their lives, that don't know how to change it, that don't know why they're experiencing what they're experiencing, and they don't know how to get out of the cycle of creating that.
Right.
And I just want to quick throw out there, this has created an opening for the fake idea that we can have instant gratification. And it has made us all vulnerable to that being marketed, to that being used to take advantage of people who are struggling and suffering and vulnerable for the sake of making money. And I just feel like I have to throw that out there, because if we grew up doing what you did this weekend, that wouldn't be there. I mean, the reason I can say that, and I've worked my way out of things, is because I grew up with parents who taught me that way.
Right.
Plus I went to school, and where do we go about making that shift back in our culture when those running society don't want that to happen?
Right.
Where's our power as a collective?
Right.
Throwing that out to you, Chris, because I know you got great answers for that.
Well, I think going back to the educational system, and grades, right? Like that's like something that's force fed to us. It's not, do you understand the subject matter, but how do you score on a test, or to prove to yourself and others that you do understand.
Yeah, it's fake. It's false.
and instead of having that versus, hey, someone takes better tests, than somebody, they don't have to study that hard, or whatever their flow is for them that works for them. The reason it's working is because they're in the flow of what works for them. And that can create curiosity. And I think the total power of the collective in our communities is being able to observe and witness other people in circumstances, places, ways of being, whatever, that are working for them, and use our curiosity and openness to learn from them. And then that allows us to grow. The people that were really good at and proficient at knitting, those were the people that you wanted to learn from, because they already had it figured out. You didn't want to ask me, who's being challenged in that circumstance, because I haven't really done that much in my life as far as that one thing was concerned. And I think that's the value of community, is our diversity, and we all do our part. We all play our role, and we create these conditions and these labels and these circumstances within our experience of life to find that we can't do it all ourselves. And it's through our relating to other people that and expressing to one another and sharing with one another and having experiences with one another that we enrich our experience of life. Yes, we have to be our individual self, which is unique, which is special, which is priceless. And, be the best version of ourselves through our own identity, not through the opinions, judgments, conditions of things outside of us. At the same time, to honor the differences, to be grateful for differences, to be grateful for variation, to be grateful for a rainy day versus a sunny day, because that is the fullness of our experience of life. And the more we can unconditionally love and accept variation, the stronger we can be as a societal organism, because that's really what humanity is. We're not here to save the planet. The planet, Pachamama, doesn't need our help. She needs us to quit hurting her so she can heal easier. There isn't extinction going on. There isn't, these challenges that we're seeing in nature. When we're observing, the reason we see these things is it's part of her cleansing process. And we put meaning on it, and that gives us a directionality. And, the mamas are known as, the protectors of the earth, and a lot of the speak, a lot of the things that the stories we were told, is really learning to live in a harmonious way, in a good way, which means doing our best not to harm others, just because it's right for us. It's easier for us. It's more convenient for us. So we're going to not care for some other thing. We were talking, of course, politics came up, and the system and things like that throughout the weekend as we were all chatting. And the thing about the system is it's set up to allow those with awareness, knowledge, and resources to benefit from those who lack that awareness. And so the goal is to enslave people to think that they have to be this way, they have to do this way, or you're not going to be able to exist. There's been people homesteading and living off grid since the grid was created. But people are scared to live that way because they don't know about it. And once they find the awareness of it, then it's a choice. Do I really want to put my energy into living this way, or would I rather go and live this other way, work in a job, a commercial industry job, whatever, and providing the resources to sustain life, to sustain my family, to be able to provide material resources so we can exist on this material plane. Do I do it this way or do I do it that way? Well, those are just the dualities of the polarities of all the things in between that you can do. When it's nice out, you're growing a garden and a vegetable garden. Well, that's going to be more nutritious for you. That's going to save you money from having to go to the grocery store. That's going to give you something to do to cure your boredom of not having anything to do. And the benefits are going to be very diverse, and you won't know until you have the experience. Is it easier to go to the grocery store and just purchase food? Maybe. I don't know what you do for your money. So maybe you have to work really hard to earn that money. Well, okay, you save time from not growing a garden, but a garden kind of does its own thing as long as you give it the resources that it needs to do what it needs to do. I don't have to force a tomato to grow. I have to give it the nutrients and the water and plant the seed so it can do what it needs to do. And we as human beings are no different. A little more complex maybe, but we're no different. We need We need the nutrients, we need the awareness, we need the love, we need the compassion, we need the understanding, the patience, whatever, however we want to define the multidimensional self of our being, one of consciousness, which is the source. If we're gonna, one of the things that blew my mind this weekend was, if we were created in God's reflection image, and we all have to have parents to be born here on life, who created the creator? And those curiosities open us up to new awarenesses that we had never thought about before, which allows us to evolve our mind and our ways of being ourselves, because it expands us. It allows us to grow. And when we contract because, well, that doesn't make any sense, or, so what, or, whatever, it has no meaning, then we limit our opportunity to be more than we've ever been before. And if everything is in the presence of now, and we can never shrink our awareness, we can't unsee something once we see it, then we're always evolving and growing. So how do we as individuals, and how do we as a collective do that in the happiest, healthiest, and most harmonious way for everything that is involved, including the ticks and the mosquitoes and the things that teach us that we can still live with irritation and still live a good life.
Chris, I think that's so powerful, and there are several things that come back theme-wise to me as you're speaking, that if we really break it down and simplify all the brilliant things you just shared, and they are so relevant. Number one is, a lot of these issues that we're talking about, a lot of our personal and collective issues, most of them, as a matter of fact, would be resolved if we just return to nature. Mm-hmm. And that means our connection individually to nature. It is, it is something that we're sort of taught and take for granted is an option. You know what I mean? We look at it as though it's an option. And what I want to emphasize here, and really what you shared today, brings to all of our attention that it's not an option. Do you know what I mean? It's a must. This is something that has to happen. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people see the connection between their own personal struggles, the things that they're struggling and suffering with, that they want to change, what they want, and what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I feel like we have been taught that is separate. And even, when we were growing up, this has been taught with this white European culture that came over, and so many cultures around the world. But mostly what we have now is, we have certain large cultures throughout the world that are very separate from nature. Mm. And I want to invite everyone to just think about, what are some of the connections there? We had dinner with friends a few years ago. Hi, Natalie. Happy Tuesday. Thank you. And the family was telling us how excited they were about their mission trip, right? And that's fine. I know a lot of people do that. They go on mission trips. But, this is something that I really strongly disagree with. Because although the intentions are well-meaning, and the people doing it are well-meaning,
Mm-hmm.
the people learning to do it, they view themselves as going in, just as the Europeans did with the Native Americans or any other culture that we've conquered, native culture we've conquered. They go in and they basically get them to change their spiritual or religious beliefs for the exchange of water and education. Well, what is promoted in the education? The same type of education we have here, along with their religious belief that they're trying to force on those people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they said to us that really struck us was they were in amazement as to how happy these people were. They said these children have nothing, not even water. They have to walk, miles a day to get water. They said, how could they be so joyful? They were so joyful. What they don't understand is by the time they're done with them, they're going to lose that joy.
Right.
Because a lot of what you're describing is, see, when you live close to nature and you do the things that our society teaches are pointless, a waste of time, useless, when you begin to go into fake efficiency and create a fake life, you lose this, you lose what brings out your natural joy, your natural abundance, your natural motivation, your natural love of life.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us are born with that naturally. If you look at a little baby, their soul is just like, it's here, it's present.
Right.
And the closest we come to maintaining that presence in a culture, and this is why they take the Dalai Lama when he's really little and they take him away
Mm-hmm.
from all of this, because the Dalai Lama grows up very naive and innocent
Mm-hmm.
of the cognitive brainwashed world. And
Right.
so as wise as he is spiritually, he was able to maintain that childlike innocence within. And that's what preserves. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been around the Dalai Lama, or I haven't been around the Dalai Lama, but his monks.
Right.
It is overwhelmingly like you don't want to be away from them.
Right.
I mean, they're oozing this
Mm-hmm.
that we all have. And I remember going to a big event and the event was over and I was literally crying because I wanted to go home with them.
Mm.
I mean, because of the energy.
Right. Right. Right.
Their energy of being in their presence was unbelievable.
Right.
And so this is kind of interesting because on yesterday's Angels in Action, I was talking about innocence, how we look down upon it. Our society frowns upon innocence and naivety, but that's our pure self. The lack of innocence and naivety comes from our cognitive brainwashing and programming. So then we can judge people. We can say, oh, you don't know that movie?
Right.
Oh, you don't know what this means?
Right.
This is why I never liked clicks.
Right.
That's what makes clicks work. That's what makes the popular people work.
Right.
Right. And so I want to remind people that in everything Chris has shared that I just find absolutely priceless. And I think these are the types of workshops and things that we should do if we do workshops and things. But this type of nothing replaces experience, especially if you want to reprogram, and nothing beats returning to nature.
Right.
Because nature is the great teacher.
Right.
If you don't learn from nature, you die.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be that extreme. It's like I don't know how many of you guys have gone camping. I mean, I've gone with people that have never been camping before.
Oh man. I've been there too, and it's like
no. And as a woman, it's even worse. Because if you're a guy going and you have a buddy that's a guy or women that go, they'll look up to you and they'll let you help.
Right.
If you go as a woman with men who have never been camping, but let's say they have military experience, but they've never gone, or whatever, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare unless I thought these people were good friends. This was years ago. But I mean, literally, we packed up my shit at 2 a.m. and went home.
Right.
Because I said, we're not going to have I said, let's not put the wet wood in the fire. This type of wood, that's not going to work. Well, they didn't listen to me. Ha ha, I'm a woman. And then they couldn't get the fire going. We had no food. We had no warmth. So finally I said, look, I'm the only one that's been camping here and has outdoor survival experience, woman or not. If you're not going to listen to me, this is all my shit. I'm packing it up because they didn't know how to set up a tent. Sure. I'm packing it up, putting it in the car, and you're driving me home. I don't care what you guys do. So instead of me calling my family to pick me up, they drove me home. But this is what we did in the middle of the night. So my point is, guys, is that, and I actually long for this. I love to do this. There's something about putting yourself out in nature, even if it's for 24 hours. And you might say, oh, we got to collect the wood. Oh, we got to light the fire. But there's something fulfilling and peaceful that will arise within you. Mm. And you start to see that actually in the needing to collect the wood, in the needing to make the fire just right, yeah, it takes up your whole afternoon. It does. But something starts to shift inside of you. Mm-hmm. And that something is what each of you is missing every day, that's causing you to be like, my life sucks. And I don't know about you, Chris, but when I look around, I am so sad. And this is most of my clients. They're spending their life mourning what they don't have, the relationship they don't have, the money they don't have the perfect job. They're not sitting in Santori in $1 million condo, working 2 hours a week from a laptop, drinking champagne and eating caviar, waiting for their private jet.
Absolutely. And I chased that dream. And, I was, for me, I went to the adult industry into drugs because it was the easiest, most efficient way to have that lifestyle without having to put in the work, which in itself was work. And it took me a long time to realize that, that for me, I had to be that I choose to be. I don't have to be. I choose to be cause driven versus compensation driven, because the compensation, if I'm focusing on that, I'm not focusing on actually being the best that I can of service. Even when I was in those industries, I was caring, I was considerate, I was loving, and wanted the best for people. And, myself, the way I chose to adulthood, I had this belief that I wasn't going to be capable of serving at a high level because I dropped out of high school. And what I found was that whatever industry I went into, I excelled at it because of my natural ability to be myself and to give what was needed to get anything accomplished. Whether that's good, bad, indifferent, that's judgment. Those are opinions. And I'm so grateful to be in this place where I am today and be able to share from my heart and from my experiences of what most people are too scared to question or to experience for themselves, which is when I can fully release some of the shame, guilt, and fear that I've carried within myself, then my expression and reflection will be purer than it was before, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. Chris, I'm sorry. I lost my Jack Russell. I can't find her. She locks herself in the bathroom. She locks herself in the room with my father-in-law, which is where I think she is. So, oh no, oh God. Oh, okay, never mind. She's asleep on the couch. Bless her heart. Okay. Keep herself locked in places. And I looked around and I was like, oh my God, she's gone. Oh, all right. No, I think this is important. And I think that at some point we need to talk about, like money. Okay.
Mhm.
Because I was a money mindset coach for business, for women in business for over 8 years. And this crosses over into that category. And again, guys, I want to emphasize money is not evil. It's not bad. But this
It's
goes into that.
unconditional. It's currency. It's unconditional love.
Well, yeah, it's just energy. It's
Mm-hmm.
neutral.
Right.
But the problem is human beings have trouble with that and the meaning that we give it.
Right.
And so whenever you have people that have not had it before and or they want it or they've had it and they want it back,
Mm-hmm.
this is where you see why people believed that, why people would say money is the devil. Okay. It's not, it's neutral. I could say sugar is the devil, but it's the concepts and ideas that we have of the things that we want, the desire that we as humans want out of things is so irresistible to us. When we start getting something that we want, it is so hard for us to walk away from that. And humans always want more and more and more and more. And unfortunately, money is freedom. It gives you a lot of freedom. It gives you security. So everything you want and making life easier and less stressful can slide under that category.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one thing to get to a place where you're comfortable and you're secure. It's another when greed starts taking over. Greed is and it doesn't have to be about money to have greed.
Right.
Greed is very fast acting addiction.
Mm.
It almost goes on autopilot. It's like, you'll see it. And many of you might never experience this on a personal level. I've experienced it with clients that I've coached or coaches that I've worked with in regards to money and abundance, is that greed is like, it would be like flying over a forest and dropping gasoline all over the forest before lighting the forest on fire.
Mm-hmm.
We think a forest fire lights fast. I mean, I have watched clients transform before my eyes, not in a good way. Once their business started kicking off, and when they came to me, I mean, this is why I got out of what I was doing, Chris, because my goal was take women that have passion and purpose, right, that want to be conscious. And when they came to me, supposedly, they wanted to fulfill their passion. And they wanted to be able to make money doing it. Mm. And I understood that.
Right.
That's always what I struggle to do. Let me make the amount of money I need to give to the charities I want, to support things, to help my family, to do the things that were not lavish and flamboyant, but just that were very meaningful, because there's so much good you can do with money.
Right.
And then I thought, well, let me help other women do that. Well, I was backstabbed, ditched, left. They were backstabbing each other. They were using one another. I was watching how they were treating the people that they were hiring. Mm. I was helping them set up, systems for people they were hiring. The attitudes that flipped. I mean, I had clients that I literally coached for 3 or 4 years that I spoke to on a daily basis, that I helped them get their businesses to $1 million. Mm-hmm. That when they decided they all of a sudden wanted to join in, they were ready to make that leap and they were going for billionaire now.
Right.
They were literally, you know what I got? An email. An email.
Right.
Not a thank you. Not 4 or 5 years, getting them to $1 million. Nothing.
Right.
And I personally don't care. One of the things I teach people is not to take things personally. The reason I'm emphasizing this, and it matters, is because it shows the lack of gratitude. It shows the lack of appreciation, not for me in coaching, for what they accomplished, for what they learned, for the person that they had to transform within themselves in order to get what they came to me saying they wanted.
Right.
The humble person that needed help when they came to me, that valued what I was doing, that valued the service. And as soon as they got what they wanted, they said to me, they said to me, it's just business.
Yeah.
It's just business.
It's not personal.
And it was interesting. No. And what's interesting is these were people I said, well, within the next year, if you want to start taking this to multi-million dollars, you're going to need to find this and this type of coach because they're in your industry.
Right.
They have that specialty and that's all that they do. So I was going to dismiss them anyway.
Right.
But it was when the greed took over and I then became a piece of shit.
Right.
They didn't have use for me anymore.
Right.
And so I want to, this is a mentality humans have anyway, not just about money. But when Chris and I are talking about get back to nature, like I said in my broadcast yesterday, every day, find your reconnection with nature, guys, because it comes down to the truth of natural law is within you already. The truth of universal law you bring with you into this world already.
Right.
The society uses the egoic veil to cover that, to morph it and use you, just as my clients used me, and many of them ran off without even paying. Mind you, they'd gotten to their $1 million.
Right. Yep.
Broke contracts, didn't pay me.
Absolutely.
This is not me being poor, pitiful me. This is me telling you what is on the other side of this.
Right.
And so what do you have left when it comes down to it? The only thing you have ever is you. You're here with yourself forever. And you sure as hell better have your truth.
Right.
Because in the end, all you have is that wisdom and truth that you have within you.
Right.
So you better be true to that. You better be in alignment with that. Anyway, I think this is important and I hope I haven't gotten too off track, Chris.
No, you're right on point. I mean, I could say the same thing with talent agency or all the other things, right? Like you play your part and I had so many, I had a contract that said you can't change your look because then we have to redo all your branding, and then they would go do it and you would mention, hey, you signed this agreement and they're like, sue me. And I'm like, well, I could. That's a way, but at the same time, don't be upset that I can't market you now because I don't have updated photos, or you're going to have to go get updated photos and you have to pay for those. And that's the consequence of not honoring the responsibility of the commitments that we make. It's
right.
It's holding ourselves accountable to saying at that time, I agreed to that. I shifted. Okay, now there's a disconnect. And then how do we reconnect it? How do we come back into harmony? How can we still be responsible for ourselves and for the contrast that we bring out in others?
Yeah, and I think this is where we have to look at, we really have to look at integrity. And I love this. I love this topic and this conversation because this is where people don't see where these things correlate. They don't see the connection, right? So, I had a client who was who I invited to be an assistant of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I'd known her for years. She was wonderful. She really needed coaching. She did the coaching and then she lost her job and it was time for her to go in the second year of coaching. I went ahead and I just had her pay a little bit in the down payment, and I let her, she said, I'm good for the money. Okay, well, she was always good with money and good with her job. Well, we had talked about her working with me because I wanted to have someone that knew what I did and believed what I did that I knew. And so we set this up. And guys, I just want to remind you of this because this is human nature. And this is something that there's a karmic element to this. Okay. I was creating a new section to my business. And I said, well, I can't give you that full-time position now, but I can have you help me create it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And she wanted to do that. And I said, but you have to get another job, get another job. So the place that let her go was offering all these new jobs to the people that they had let to go from their original job. But she didn't take one.
Right.
She was offered dozens of them. She didn't take it. And I kept reminding her, I can't pay you what they're paying you.
Right.
And I will not hire a client that has not finished my program and paid me yet, because that's part of, I have to know they can follow through. They're going to honor their commitment. They've been through my program. She didn't do it. Well, guess what? 6 months later, she decided she'd slowly stopped, doing coaching, but we'd sit down for a Friday meeting and she'd be gone. She wouldn't be there. Where would she be? She decided to hop on a plane and fly somewhere for the weekend with friends without letting me know. So of course I couldn't hire her. Right? Because I didn't have the corporate structure that she did well with.
Right.
And so instead of, and guys, this is another lesson here, and this is part of the lesson of the weaving that you get, that you were talking about. What I should have done was been upfront like I am, and I should have said, hey, this isn't working, and this is why, and here's my fault in it.
Mm.
I didn't want to hurt her feelings. She was so excited every time she sat down. I kind of, she knew what she was doing, so I didn't.
Right.
Well, in the end, she didn't finish her second year of coaching. She ran off and basically disappeared. She got upset because I wasn't paying her the salary I said I would pay her if this worked and things got set up. So she was helping me, and I was going to give her a discount on the coaching. Right. But my point here, guys, is even people you think that you know well, it is human nature to want to take advantage of that energy exchange. And we can claim, like in her case, all of a sudden she was able to say, oh, it wasn't a misunderstanding. All of a sudden she said that I had said, oh, I could exchange this work for coaching. No, I never said that. I would have put it in writing. So people will make up what fits their circumstances at the time. Right. But here's the thing I want to emphasize to you guys, because I'm speaking to all of you as though you were this person that I was going to hire. Everything is energy. When you get something for free or you give something away for free, and you guys have heard me say this before, but I cannot emphasize this enough because it sounds like a money thing, but it's really not just a money thing. It's an energy thing. Mm-hmm. Nothing is for free, and there are no shortcuts. Nothing is for free, and there are no shortcuts. When someone is giving their time and energy for free, someone is paying for that time somewhere. Right. Every time I get on here, I am giving my time and energy away for free when I could be doing a client or something that would be bringing in money that would feed my animals, help my husband pay for things, whatever the case is. Right. Okay. We're all sacrificing something every time, and that's our choice. Mm-hmm. But understand that if you have a pattern of wanting that, grabbing for that, competing for that, or allowing people to give you that you get what you give, that energy comes back to you. Mm-hmm. So my real concern in my story and my wanting to share about my client with you guys is that, yeah, she stole thousands of dollars from me and countless hours of coaching. But the real person damaged that she probably doesn't realize yet is her. Right. Because she stopped partway through the coaching process, which takes a couple of years to get where she wanted to go. And she was doing great. All for the sake of getting something free and thinking she wanted things fair a certain way. Right. And the reason she did that was the same reason she was in coaching. it was the same mindset and mentality that she needed coaching for, caused her to do what she did.
Right.
So you can be sure she's repeating those patterns of misery and unhappiness now.
Right.
And I want you guys to think about that for yourself. It doesn't mean you have to give, and never receive. There's a balance.
It's called INI, and there should be reciprocity in everything. And when there's not, that's when we shift what we're putting out.
That's the great imbalance.
Right. Yeah.
And so just keep that in mind, guys, because I think sometimes people hear me say this and they think, oh, she's just, trying to get me to get her paid stuff and this and that. No, that's your choice. I'm very picky about who I coach or who I read for. I don't want just everybody. I mean, I would be, a billionaire by now if that was all I cared about. The point is that you have to understand that whatever's going on in your life, even if it's you have an unhappy relationship or you can't find or keep a good job, usually those people come to me and say, I do everything for everyone else. People aren't being fair to me. I'm the giver. I'm the nice one. I have a surprise for all of you. That's true. There is somewhere in you an element of need and take and fear you haven't gotten over, and you're not being as kind or generous as you think you are. Right. That is really hard for people to see. That's one of the egoic veils things. But 95%, I know my husband says, don't use percentages on here, but I would say if I'm guessing, 95% of the people that I have worked with that are struggling and suffering, they don't realize how they're giving that out.
Right.
Because if you weren't giving it out in some way, you wouldn't be getting it back.
Exactly.
So
that's the mirror, right?
Don't just think you're an angel and the world is doing everything to you, because I can tell you right now, it all centers around you.
Right. Yep. And when someone's like, why are you angry at me? And it's like, well, maybe, I'm angry at the fact that we're out of alignment, and I'm trying to communicate that things are out of alignment. And sometimes we do that with our emotions and not our words.
With reactions.
It's just a reaction. And, the beautiful teaching of anger is how much we actually care for something. Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't have an anger response. You would be like, whatever, who cares? No skin off my teeth. Doesn't bother me. You know how I know? We see it every day and people do nothing about it.
Well, right. We tend to project it outward.
Right.
We project outward. And this is, again, guys, this is the egoic veil. We project out instead of taking radical responsibility.
Yeah,
and
sucking in.
Right. And what does this do? I mean, again, guys, for those of you going, what does it have to do with natural law? Everything.
Yeah, it's energy.
It's energy. And we're relying on other people and their disapproval of us, or us being fined or in trouble or punished or something like that, in order to keep us in line. We are relying on that instead of our own radical responsibility and self-discipline.
Right.
And so when we live in that, then we can say, well, okay, fine, sue me. It shouldn't come to that. Right. You should care enough that you are acting on integrity and the way that you want to be treated.
Right.
That should never be an issue.
Right.
You should care enough that you say, you know what? I signed this contract. I committed to myself. You had me do this, so I would commit to myself. I am committing to myself and finding integrity in this. And really, our reasons are excuses.
Right.
So, if the point here is that if you are unhappy, if you are miserable, if you are struggling, you got to look at what you're doing first.
Right.
Not what's being done to you that you think is being done to you, or what your external circumstances are. As Chris said in the beginning, your habits and repetition are what have you where you are.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you should feel bad or be mad at yourself. It is what it is. Start from where you are now. Take what you learned, and you need to have some radical honesty and some radical responsibility. That, guys, is where transformation begins. I especially in readings, I always hear about, oh, my family this and my family's hard on me and they pick on me and they're not nice to me and this and that. Okay. Welcome to the world.
Right.
So
just have that experience.
you can keep feeling sorry for yourself and wallowing in it.
Right.
Or you can do something about it. And the only way you can ever do something about anything is taking radical responsibility, because as you shift your internal responses, your life shifts around you, including people.
Right. Absolutely. And a personal experience. We just had all these ceremonies this month in April. It was a wonderful, wonderful month for the organization and for, healing and all those things. And my dad came to me yesterday and said, we need to talk about how you use this land. And I'm uncomfortable when you're having all these things here because it limits what I'm able to do, because I don't want to disturb you. And I said, I understand that. I said, totally 100% respect that. And I agree. And it's something that we do have to come to some kind of harmonious agreement with. I said, but before we can have that conversation, I want you to know that, yes, I benefit by being a part of something, by having an experience, by allowing and creating opportunities for others to join in this experience that we're doing. And also those that we are praying for, that we're holding space for, that we're sending love and compassion for. Those are all part of what we're doing here. And so if you want to focus on just yourself, that is your right, and I honor that. And we can also look at all the benefits that are happening outside of you because you sacrificed so this opportunity could actually take place. Working the job, saving the money, purchasing the property, allowing me to live here, giving me the opportunity and allowing me to actually do the things. Like, I'm so honored and grateful for that. And the little bit of ribbing, the little bit of complaining, the little bit of whatever, like, yeah, that's part of the medicine. That's part of the growth for myself and for my relationship with my father. But as my friend was saying this morning, it still all happened. You still got to experience it. You still got to create it. People still got to have their opportunities and gain what they gained. So that to me is the duality of oneness, of wholeness, because there was both light, the good stuff that we all experience and the experience that we had, and the contrast that came from someone that didn't get to have that same experience because they chose not to participate in it. But they still helped create the opportunity, so they were part of it. Did that make sense? You're on mute, Larkin.
Sorry, my Siamese is crying in the background, so I muted myself. It's interesting because that's, it's all about choice. And I find it interesting this week too, because I love when themes come up on different broadcasts, the same themes. And, again, it's in a reading last night that I was doing on a live. The same topic came up with this lady. And it was so neat because, what came through to her was, there's like these fine lines in choices that we make. And the difference between like a boundary and when we are allowing ourselves, when our ego feels like, oh, I'm being walked on, or I'm being told what to do, or I'm being walked all over. And there's a difference, understanding the difference between when that's really happening and when you really need to bend and give in and adapt for someone, and the reciprocity that comes from that. And what people have a tendency to do is not have good enough boundaries, or any boundaries, but then they allow themselves to be walked all over. But then they're resentful and they don't want to bend and give and adapt. If we just flipped that, if we had the boundaries that were clear and consistent, so people felt secure, they knew what they were, but then we didn't, we're not allowing ourselves to be walked all over. But then we went ahead and gave in to things that really matter to them. What we find is our relationships are so much better because the reciprocity that we would get back from the gratitude from those people is phenomenal. So somebody wants to do something, you're like, well, what about my way? What about what I want? Just, that means something to them. Just do it their way.
Right.
But the key is if you don't have boundaries anyway for yourself, then you're not going to want to do that because you're going to feel that you're being taken advantage of.
Right.
You're not going to want to give in and bend for them. But if you have boundaries and you feel in your center, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
Please tell a person with good boundaries, because I can see if they have that pattern or not.
Right. And I admit I don't have too many boundaries. I have standards that that I want to live by for myself, and those that I keep in my life. And like I would prefer not to be lied to. If you're aware of things and it's the proper time to share them, then share them, express them. But there's no need to create a false story, which is what a lie is, right? To not take personal responsibility for what happened and what is now existing. Like, I lost my job because I wasn't showing up enough, or I wasn't doing my job properly, so they let me go. Okay. That happens. You just go get a new job, learn from it, move on. But if you say, oh, they let me go because they didn't like me, or I challenged them in some way, then I think that is limiting responsibility and accountability for the roles that we're actually playing in life. Boundaries, to me, at least the way a lot of people use them as a self-protection mechanism, because they're trying to control their environment. If it's not malicious harm, this is just my opinion. If you're not being malicious and intentionally harming someone or something, then there is no right or wrong. When you know it's going to hurt somebody, and you know it's going to hurt their feelings, it's going to whatever, and you intentionally do it anyway because it's easier for you, then you have to question, yourself, I believe.
I was just going to move upstairs here. That's why I turned my camera off. I think that is such an important point, and that actually, Chris, that actually brings up an entirely different topic, which I think we should do a whole maybe not a whole series, but I think we should do a whole show on, actually, because what you're referring to is, I mean, and I agree with you. It's a really good point. A lot of people need that, though.
Right.
Like, a lot of people really need those boundaries, especially if they have been victims or they're very codependent and they're in a codependent situation. If they, even if they're the, the one mistreating other people, a lot of times that's because of lack of boundaries, because the boundaries replace their reaction to their sense of insecurity and lack of control. But you're right. And there's what I find is that when I teach people who don't have boundaries, and they keep taking that, eventually the idea is it should integrate naturally, so that they don't have to view and look at it as a boundary. It's just more of a standard, right? A way of being.
Right.
But some people have to be taught that manually because they didn't learn that as a kid, right? Whereas if we go back and we talk about, we see your comment, Chrissy. If we go back and we look at what we spoke about in the beginning of this broadcast, and we're talking about returning to nature and natural law, if we were all raised according to that, we would all have boundaries that were very rational, that made natural sense, that we could discuss upon. Whereas now, because we're living in such a fake society that we've created, and we're so detached from the actual real world and what's natural to our brain and bodies and emotions and nervous system, we are all creating our own fake boundaries. And it's not so much even the boundaries, I think, that are the problem. It's kind of what you were saying, how and what they're used for. It becomes, when a person doesn't have them and they learn them, oftentimes they're so focused on using them, on mine being respected.
Yeah. You violated my.
So what's happened there again is that the ego again has taken a good thing, something that should be useful, like it does with anything and everything, and made its own meaning out of it, to use it to its advantage, right? So, for example, I shouldn't be able to say, well, it's my boundary that I don't, you can't, I'm not going to ever talk to you again because I have this boundary of, people aren't allowed to look at me that way.
Right.
And that's again damaging the person that has that boundary.
Right.
You have to understand, when you have a boundary, you have to understand that boundary starts and ends with you. It's not something you're allowed to shove out into the world and try to force the world to change. And we have right now, I find people right now in the early to mid 20s and below, they have been brainwashed to believe that if they feel discriminated against or picked on, or they're looked at the wrong way, that everyone else has to change. And if not, you're out of line, you're politically incorrect. First of all, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They have no life experience. No offense, but it's true. Second of all, it's going to come back and it's going to backfire. It's going to because that's not life.
Right.
Anywhere.
Right.
So in their little bubble of friends and professors and parents who don't want to lose them, and so they oblige.
Right.
They may think that they're controlling the world, and they get that illusion that they are.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is that I feel very sorry for those kids. I feel very sorry for that generation, because that's not life.
Right.
And at some point, when they're outside of that little bubble, and we all have to get outside of that little bubble of people, the world is not going to cater to you. And right. You may, they've been intentionally raised to believe that it will.
Right.
And that was intentionally done in order to weaken them and use them and separate them from older generations. I mean, I hear them saying all the time, your generation has ruined it for us.
Right.
No, we haven't. Every generation is struggling to make transitions while established societies are trying to tear us down as individuals, and communities we're trying to build ourselves up. And every generation goes through that. The question is, you know, are we lost enough that we don't have a purpose, that we're not working collectively on? Which I believe, unfortunately, that age group and below they haven't had that opportunity. That's been taken away. You know, I don't want to say it's taken away; it's always there. But you know, it's very sad because they don't even recognize that opportunity.
Well, they're unaware because they've been
unaware intentionally. That
right.
was kept in their unawareness. And
right.
what happens is, you know, you see them chronically full of anxiety, full of depression, and this is why the very thing they think is the enemy is not the enemy.
Right.
And so again, guys, and we'll get to you in just a second, Chrissy, you have to look inward. This is why it takes people 2 to 3 years to get through a coaching program that really works. There is no instant gratification, right? And so you have to take radical responsibility. There is no other choice if you want to have that inner transformed experience.
Right. Can we get to Chrissy real quick?
Yes, please do. I just had someone walk in, so I put myself.
Yeah. So great point here, Chrissy. You know, and you know that's a reaction, right? And that's a unconscious, subconscious, however you want it, response. And that's part of what I would think of is the awareness of what hasn't truly been healed yet. Because I can do the same thing if I'm not heard properly, if I'm not seen in the way that I want to be seen, those types of things. Reactions happen, and they happen for us, not to us, but for us. So then we can gain the awareness of where we've created beliefs where we're being violated, and that guilt means you care, which is a good thing. You know, or feeling horrible afterwards. It's a good thing. You're remorseful for a misstep in the communication process, or you know, those types of things. While it's not tasty medicine or feel good medicine, it's still a medicine that can heal us. And you know, as Larkin says, radical responsibility, radical acceptance, and holding yourself accountable. And, you know, if you have the opportunity to express yourself to that person, you know, hopefully things can be mended and repaired and healed. It's not always the truth. It's not always the fact. And, you know, I'm totally guilty. And I same thing, you know, in so many different ways that, you know, that I've gotten the opportunity to go back and say, you know, I misstepped there. I made a mistake. I had a misunderstanding, whatever. And, you know, if I could do it over again, I would. But that the past was the lesson. So now I can practice it in the now. And if those circumstances, those similarities, those relational things come up, that's our opportunity to prove to ourselves and to that individual that we're healing and we're growing.
Absolutely. I first of all, I'm going to say, and this does not have to be me, Chrissy, I would honest to God, guys, I tell everybody this. And so I have to say, it does not have to be me. Find yourself a good mindset coach. I'm not kidding, because Chris is exactly accurate. But here's the problem. Almost nobody creates the change and transformation that they want. And I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm going to lift you up, make you feel better before I'm done. But the reason people don't, and you can hear Tony Robbins say this, he'll say, you know, this is why 99% of people fail, to transform and manifest what they want. And it's true. They're missing the key factors, and it's always mindset. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you're doing healing. I don't care what it is. 95% of your mind you're not aware of is the cause of exactly what it is you're sharing there. And it is not an overnight fix, even though they try to tell you that it is. It's not. Do not pay $10,000 for an 8-week program, please. It is a long, steady marathon of getting to know who you really are, of becoming aware of your mind, which is what literally everything you have a problem with, you're just not aware of. Right. It shows up appearing as something else in your life, and then you show up experiencing it as struggle and suffering. But the truth is it is habits and repetition of your neurological programming and the choices that you're making. End of story. I can summarize it like that. That is everybody's problem. And everyone's like, oh, we're individuals. That's not true. No, it is true, because we're humans. Right. And only those of us that have been through intentional transformation understand the truth of that. Right. And unfortunately, you have to take the risk of investing the time and money and dedication to yourself to transform that. Right. I was fortunate enough that my personality is tenacious as hell. So I took years, way more than 3 to 5 years, on my own, every day, 24/7. I was obsessed with getting to know what was going on and what was at the bottom of things. Right. I don't know many people that can do that. Right. So that's why I say get a mindset coach, because for most people, they get so distracted by their own thoughts, they can't do it. Find a mindset coach that uses your life as your school, right? So like with my coaching clients, we use their life. Right. Day by day, whatever's coming up, we wait. When that shit hits the fan, that's when it's time to apply this stuff. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not going to be an overnight fix. It's going to take you a minimum of a good 2 to 3 years to really start experiencing a change. Right. Don't believe me? Look at Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. Right. He's proven that with lifestyle and physical disease. He can teach people to reverse diseases, but it takes them 3 years to start seeing the effects. Right. So, this is why I always say I cherry pick my clients, because most people won't stick with that. So you have to be committed to yourself, find a mindset coach. You can't do this stuff on willpower. Emotion always trumps logic. So you have to create a new series of beliefs, which create a new series of patterns of thinking, feeling, and choices. Thinking, feeling, and action. That habit and repetition has created your life to where it is now. And it takes habits and repetition to see a result. Okay. That is my personal advice. I've been coaching this for over 15 years. My clients that have worked with me 2 to 5 years have completely transformed their lives. But keep in mind, that is a very small percentage of people. So the question is, how badly do you want to experience life where you don't worry about that anymore, where it's second nature for you to have enough peace inside and self-control? You're not going to worry about what you say because you trust yourself. And you don't have to say it out for an emotional release. You are just, it's like, you can think about it, be like, oh yeah. Or you don't feel the pressure or the fear of reacting to what someone else is going to say. What we're really talking about here is mental liberation. Where you're free of what your ego forces you into. Okay. So understand, if we're talking guilt, fear, procrastination, reaction, all of confusion, all of those things are egoic. They're all of the mind. And you don't have to live that way. Right. But we've been taught to live that way. So if you have spent 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years learning to live the way you are now, then please understand it's going to take you at least 3 to 5 years to start seeing the results. I see the results in my clients immediately, usually within 3 to 6 months. So a good mindset coach will see the results before the client can recognize them for themselves. Okay.
Well, it's the speed of light, right?
Well,
so
yeah.
like for
And
it to be manifested in the physical form, it takes more time than the energy. And when we're looking as healers, as coaches, as whatever,
yeah.
we're looking at the energy of their whole existence, because we're trying to help them organize their energy, right? I mean,
when you can see from the outside,
right?
I mean, we can't see what's happening on our own, right? So
right.
Are you open to that? Are you is a person receptive to coaching?
Right.
Are they receptive to criticism? Are they receptive to someone saying, I mean, this is one of the things I think Chris and I both have in common. Someone can say to us, hey, you're doing this. And we're going to stop and think, okay, well, even if they're not exactly accurate in what their perception is, what am I doing? What is my part in this? And that's a willingness to be vulnerable, to look at yourself honestly, because I don't know about you, Chris, but it doesn't seem like it. Neither of us see that as a threat.
Mm-mm.
Anything that helps my self-awareness excites me. I don't see that as a threat. Whereas for most people, that criticism is a threat to their identity, right?
Well, to their ego. Yeah.
You're welcome, Greg. I'm glad you appreciate that.
And Greg, to answer your question, for me, why I chose to go into coaching was because people were coming to me asking me to help them with their situations. And I was looking for a way to be able to be of service and still take care of myself and my family's needs. It was really that. It wasn't like this, epiphany of like, this is what I've been destined to be. This is my purpose. It was just, I found it for me. I see things from a different way, which help people see a different perspective, how it's delivered, whatever. And it helped them in a beneficial way for the rest of their life. And I felt good about being of service and being compensated for it. And that allows me to take care of myself and my family in a commercial way or a material way. And that's why I chose to do it. It was really pretty simple.
For me, I had gone to graduate school for psychology, and I quickly learned how limited I would be as a psychologist with what I could work with. And no offense, how behind psychology was with certain areas. And I didn't want the limitations. So I decided to go into coaching instead, because I could apply and use what I had used on myself that was not allowed or was not emphasized in psychology. I didn't believe in going back around and around and around. Not everyone needs that. Some people with certain degrees of disorders and things really need that. But what I discovered was the answer to all of that really was to get beyond the mind, to get beyond the mind as the conscious observer, so that your mind could be a tool. And part of that was a psychic intuitive thing. Part of that was a cosmic memory thing. Part of that was what I discovered through going through graduate school for psychology. So this combination of things let me know, oh, that's not really, it's a good attempt at the answer, but psychology isn't the answer.
Right.
Self-awareness is the answer. Conscious awakening is the answer. You don't have to fully consciously awaken like Eckhart Tolle. There are so many levels of consciousness. And so I've been able to combine my intuitive psychic work with that, just like Chris combines his healing work and his intuitive work with coaching. And, doesn't that make sense, guys? Because guess what? You're a whole being. You're eternal consciousness, electromagnetic energy that's conscious. Right. In a temporary form that we call physical. It's not really physical. Our vibrational body is just vibrating more slowly. So we get to experience the physical world. But if you have a cold, do you just want to blow your nose? Or do you also want to hydrate, take care of the sore throat, take care of the, maybe you have a fever, whatever the case may be. As a being, do you want to just take care of the mental part? What about the emotional part and the spiritual part and the consciousness part that is experiencing everything is the observer behind your thoughts, as Eckhart Tolle says.
Right.
So, I think Chris can speak for this as well, but I know for myself, I can say that my coaching is based on becoming more conscious, because your problems start and end in the mind. They start in the mind.
Right.
You're not going to put out fire with fire. Your
Right.
mind is the fire. So you better remember that you're the consciousness behind that mind, so that either you're ruling your mind, or your mind is ruling you. And,
Right.
and, you know, I know Chris and I try to simplify this stuff. It's really that simple. You know, it's really that simple.
Right.
Yes, Greg, it's a journey to get there. He says, I can feel the positive energy from both of you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that feedback. I sure hope so.
Right.
I get
Absolutely.
pretty intense sometimes, so that's good.
Well, it's hard not to be so, and
we're passionate about it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're passionate about something, and here's the thing. When you know something, when you've done it so many times and you've watched so many people go through it, and you know the process so well, you can't help but be passionate about it, because each and everything we share, we know that that's just touching the surface level that you might not even remember when you get off of here. Every single thing we say in here that just seems, oh, to most people, that's just the phrase she said or the sentence she said. You have no idea that every sentence we're saying has thousands of hours of experience behind it. And that the way we say it is so specific, because we know how easy it is to fall through the cracks. Mm. And that's why, at least in my voice, you hear the passion I do. Because I say it and I'm like, God, this is not even the tip of the iceberg for these people. Sure. With the advice I just sent them off with. And chances are most of you won't even take the advice.
Right.
You probably won't get a mindset coach. You'll probably come back to this 10 years ago and go, she suggested getting a mindset coach. And it's not just because I want you as my client. I don't. If you want to check me out, great. If you don't.
Right. It's
just because everybody needs to do this work. Everybody has an ego and a mind, and you're either in charge of it or you're not.
Right. So. Well, you want to wrap up for the day, because you and I are going to be able to talk. We can talk about this stuff for years.
I know. I know. And I said, please, 90 minutes today. So
yeah, right.
Trying to hold me to that. There's my Siamese, guys. There's a little monster. Don't be fooled by her cuteness. She's gorgeous, but she's loud. This cat is a booger. See, she's looking.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Greg.
Yeah, that's who you've been hearing. She's awfully gorgeous, though. I guess that counts for something.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I can go into the story about that. I'm going to resist.
One, I got many. I got lots. That's the biggest animal lover you'll ever meet.
But thank you so much, Greg. Thank you.
It's cool. See their pretty blue eyes.
Yeah, look at her.
They're actually way more blue than that, but ouch.
Well, that's what you get for.
I knew I had a matter of seconds. She's going, Mom, you got minus seconds here.
Yeah.
Held her as long as I could.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so grateful we talked about the natural and universal laws today. I mean, you're right. I coach that. I mean, that's my program. Gauge, gratitude, awareness, unity, growth, and energy. Why? Because they apply to everything. And I can't give specific directionality for someone's experience unless I know where they've been, where they are, and where they desire to go. If somebody wants to go to Florida, I'm not going to be able to give them accurate directions if I think they want to go to California.
That's the exact analogy I've used.
And and that's it really can come down to that. And I wish everyone the best of their experience of every day, because that's what I want to experience. I want to send those prayers, those blessings, those things out. Why? Because that's how I want to live. It's selfish. And you know what? It's okay, because what's the worst that's going to happen? Everybody's going to live a great life. I'm not imposing my will onto other people. I'm attempting not to control the outcome, but to embrace the process that it is that we each get to live, that we each get to experience, we each get to share and relate with one another. Because at the end of the day, the world is going to go on without us. Mother Nature, Pachamama, doesn't need us to take care of her. She needs us to take care of ourselves and quit unconsciously hurting for our own comforts and our own experiences of life. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. I wonder, first of all, Greg, that is so cool. You guys are like psychic therapeutic rock stars. That is so awesome.
Right? I think that was one of the nicest things I've ever been told.
We got to use that as a quote for something.
Yeah, it's going to be on my business card now.
When we get on some other podcasts, we're going to use that, Greg. That's just amazing. Boy, that's awesome.
Thank you, Kim.
Let's see. Wait a second. Kim, thank you so much. I'm glad. Thank you for your support here. Let's see. Yes, Chris is walking the road. Absolutely, he is. And this is the, this is the thing, guys, is you have to make sure, that reminds me, Kim, that you're walking your talk. And what that means is radical responsibility. What that means is showing up for what you're saying, showing up before you're even saying it, right? So thank you, Greg. But if you guys have things that you are, really love or would really like us to talk about or share, we have other things in the works. We're just not sharing yet. We don't have them all plotted out. But if you have other things or things that would be helpful and supportive to you, or questions and topics you want us to talk about, please share. Facebook has some funky things going on. So if you also want to subscribe to our YouTube channel and invite other people, that would be great, because that gives us both platforms in case Facebook gets too wonky. At least we have two platforms to communicate and connect with all of you on. And we just want to thank you guys for showing up and being here with us and sharing. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks again. Much love and gratitude for all that you are, all that you do, and all that you choose to be and then become. So until next week, we'll see you then. We do this every Tuesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. So check us out. Facebook. You can subscribe to our channels, the Enhance Your World Show, Facebook, YouTube, and our personal pages and groups. So much love. See you next week.
Bye, everyone.